Welcome to Amateur Hour CX, a podcast on the state of cycling from our point of view in the grassroots ranks, or pretty much whatever strikes Eric's fancy based on who he could trick to come on the show today. I'm Mark Walling, and here's your host, Eric Schillinger.
I just got done swimming, so I feel like I'm still carrying water, but that's all right.
Oh God, are you like trying to do another triathlon, like a real triathlon?
Oh yeah, I got a backyard one planned at home.
Oh really? I actually wanted to talk about your backyard triathlons as a thing I thought we should talk about. Can you tell our listening audience what you mean when you say backyard triathlon?
Yeah, so I live in Bennington, Vermont. It's not a hotbed of distance triathlons. And so a lot of times you have to travel to go do very cool ones in, Lake Placid or Lake George, which, we've done as a family. But I don't know, it was 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago I decided I wanted to do an Ironman because I had originally applied for the original Hawaiian one when I was 18. And of course they wisely told me to go away. And I kind of put it on the to-do list and forgot about it. And my wife ended up racing at Lake Placid, and I was like, I should do that eventually. But it's just really expensive, and I have kids and a mortgage and a job like everybody else. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to just plan something locally and cover the distance and just have it finish at my house or close to, so I can have, beer and pizza as soon as I want to and not have to wait for things. And so, I started using really simple tools like Map My Ride and found a body of water locally that I won't get run over by powerboats. And, of course, there's lots of nice mountains to climb on a bike around here. And then you just got to find a loop for a marathon locally, which Bennington actually is a little bit of a challenge because everywhere you go, whichever direction you head out of town, it goes up a hill. So, I spent my money on a hand-me-down triathlon bike and getting some quality coaching. And that's where I spent my big bucks instead of, $600 racing fee and mandatory 2 or 3 nights in a hotel and family, being covered and all that good stuff.
So we're talking to Tim Payne, who is the promoter of the Wicked Creepy Cyclocross race in Bennington, Vermont, and that's the real reason that I wanted to talk to him today. But maybe really secretly, the real reason I wanted to talk to you was about that stuff, because that's the craziest thing that I basically have heard of anybody doing lately.
Well, I just think that everybody should go to Lake Placid once. It's like a serious party for the endurance types, but it can be a little intimidating, man. I went to Lake Placid and hadn't done a triathlon in 20 years. And just the $10,000 bikes and the $1,000 wetsuits and the, all these electronics plugged into people. And I was like, for a beginner, I could just imagine you're like, I could never afford to get in this game. It's just too expensive. It's too intimidating. And you see some really fit people at Lake Placid. That's a qualifier for Hawaii. So you see some serious athletes. And I don't know. Like I said, I like the training part of it. Race day is fine, but I'd rather go Placid's got a beautiful bike loop and it's challenging, but there's plenty of pretty places to ride in Vermont too. And, my marathon course, there were times where I'm like, I dig just running by myself. And then there were other times, probably at mile 20, where I was like, man, I wish there was a couple hundred people around me right now just struggling like I am. And, you'd have a little moral support to get to the finish line.
So that's a nice segue in that you are in Vermont, right? And your Wicked Creepy Cyclocross races in Vermont. Yeah,
right here in Willow Park in Bennington, Vermont.
Why is it in the NYCROSS series?
Because you and I went to nationals the last time it was in New England before it came back to Hartford.
The last time it was in New England, yeah.
Yeah. I remember, I don't know. At that time I probably had 5-6 guys locally who were racing cross, 5-6 races a year. John Rowe, who's connected to Nav, would jump in. He's a big mountain bike racer, but he'd jump in the fall. So we were doing some local things, and we kind of made this, a couple of us were just starting families, and we're like, look, we'll make it a rule. We'll travel an hour in any direction for a cross race. And that really meant you had to go to NYCROSS. So I remember going to Troy. I remember Gary's backyard. I remember some park that
Story
had a huge...
time. Wait, what?
Gary's backyard.
Which Gary? Toth or
Gary Toth.
Gary Toth.
What? Wow, that's really awesome. That I forget that Gary's backyard is like a historic thing. Like Mark doesn't probably know about Gary's backyard.
Oh yeah, I mean, therapy and medication have helped me recover, but it's
only so much.
I just remember showing up. First of all, we didn't think we were in the right spot because it was like someone's driveway. And we're like, nah, man, we screwed this up, and this is before Google and maps and all that. So we're like, no, man, we screwed this up. We're in the wrong place. And then Gary comes out of the garage. He's like, come on, registration's in my garage. And so and I just remember it raining, and I remember just running a lot. Like it would have probably been smart just to drop the bike in the pit and start running laps. It would have been faster. It was crazy.
Gary got the idea that he would host a cyclocross race at his house, and he said to us that he had all sorts of snowmobile trails. Gary lives in Stephentown, New York, which is very rural, and he described having a large piece of property and a lot of trails and plenty of space, and it would probably be kind of a trail race, but this was many years ago, and it wasn't unusual for 50 or 60 people to come to the race. So I'm like, you want to have 60 people at your house for a cyclocross race? Okay, I guess we'll try this. And I remember on the day before the race, we went up to his house, and we get there, and he basically has it all marked out, and the laps are taking about 4 minutes to do. What Gary perceived was like, a lot of snowmobile trail and cross country ski trail and all sorts of things. Really was not very much, and it was not nearly as long as it needed to be. But it was very gnarly. There were stone wall fences that you had to cross and all sorts of there were barriers, but it was a joke that we put man-made barriers there. The whole course was a barrier.
Oh yeah, because he made us run up a hill and then climb over a barrier.
The barriers were right at the top of a hill. So when we went to we really went to help him set it up, but he had it mostly set up because he was just like at his house, so he was just doing it whenever he felt like it. So when we went to check it out, it was sunny and 70 degrees, and we're like, this is going to be a problem, man. How are you going to score this race if we're like coming around like lap after lap after like 3 minutes? Like, and I'm not like that fast, and I'm doing 4 minute laps. Justin Lindeen shows up here, and he's going to be doing 2 minute laps, right? And Justin Lindeen did show up, and he won. And the difference was about 5 minutes after we left his house on, I guess probably it was Saturday night, I would imagine. It started raining, and it rained like an inch an hour for like 5 hours straight.
We were doing the Tough Mudder way before the cool kids.
Yeah, it was that, right? Before that was a thing that you would want to do and pay to do. It was just that. And it was every inch of it was just a death slog that was in large part not rideable.
Oh my God.
And then Al Donahue and Justin Lindeen show up. And there was a few years where they were really having they'd have like these NYCROSS slugfests where they'd show up and race our 1, 2, 3 races and just beat each other into the ground. And it was like a battle royale, but a battle royale that was also a combination of like the Hunger Games and also like a tractor pull. Like I can't, there was an element of it that didn't make a lot of sense. And then the thing that was really, the thing that I remember being the most sort of substantial about it was Gary's emotion. He was so pumped to have this at his house and like have his like wife doing registration for him in their garage. And then he got really, really angry at the end of the day because James Ducko and I had gone into his refrigerator and we took all his beer and drank it.
That doesn't sound like you at all.
No, but I knew Gary, so like I was, I'd been to his house before. It wasn't like it was strange that I was at his house. Like I remember warming up and like stretching on like his living room floor.
Oh my God. We still talk about that. I mean, at least 4 or 5 of us from Vermont made the trip. And I mean, it's bad when you got to get off the bike and carry it downhill through the trees, through the T section. You don't get, like, there was no coast. The only coast was like the uphill driveway section.
Just every portion of it was hard. And you're right. You were best served by probably pushing your bike even downhill most of the time.
So, I mean, that story comes in really handy. So like when Gary's your head ref and, I love him because he's the guy that certified our course the first year. And I've screwed things up and he's helped me fix it. But, if he ever gets hammering me too hard, I'm like, hey, look, this isn't your backyard. We're not half-assing it or something like that. He at least smirks when he hears that, man. He gives you a little respect for like, all right.
You were there for that? Okay. Right.
Oh my God. Yeah. So, I mean, NYCROSS, the origin story is really like, we went to nationals because we piled into a van and we drove out of Bennington down to, God, where was it even at, Eric?
It was in Providence. It was
in Providence. That's right.
The second year that they had it, they used to, up until I think about 2010, when they awarded a nationals bid, they would do it for 2 consecutive years. So there were 2 years in Providence, and it was the second year because the first year was like an epic snowstorm, and then the second year was like a nice settle. It was like nice. It was spectacular weather, basically.
Yeah. So I remember walking in. And walking into the park the first morning when we first got there, and you guys were walking in too. And I don't know if you had NYCROSS gear on or something, but we were like, hey, we know you guys. And we got chatting for a little bit. And then really riding home in the van, group of friends of mine were like, I've lived in Bennington for over 20 years. And I remember getting here first moving here. And there were a pretty good, solid group of guys who were probably about 20 years older than I was, who'd done triathlons and they'd done centuries and rode a lot. They always said, we need to have a bike race here. We need to have a bike race. So on the van ride home, the crew that, the Wicked crew, which, that's what we turned into, we're like, look, a cyclocross race is probably the easiest thing to do because you don't have to close down roads. Bennington downtown is kind of a prickly place for like a criterium kind of thing. So let's go to the park and see if they'll let us do this. And Bennington Park and Rec has been awesome. They were just like, you want to hold a bike race? Awesome. They didn't even charge us for years. And now they charge us a minimal fee, and, we have the grounds crew who supports us and all that. But really we kind of picked cross because we were doing it. And it was like even none of us had any experience organizing races. So, that was the race we picked. We just figured we'll do a cyclocross race and see who shows up, But pretty quickly it was like, look, we better connect with NYCROSS because they're going to tell us what we're screwing up. And you're going to get, locals traveling from race to race. And NYCROSS has really made it possible for the Wicked to exist because you got folks coming over to Bennington. Otherwise they wouldn't, they wouldn't cross the frontier to come race in Willow Park.
There is that
Berkshire Wall.
That Iron Curtain descending from the Champlain in the north to the to Connex in the south. That is.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I get it for so. Noah, my oldest right now, is racing in the New York High School League mountain biking, and I'm just amazed. We're traveling 3 hours south of Albany to go to races because there doesn't seem to be any venues locally, but you talk to New Yorkers and they're really nice people at the races. And they're like, where are you from? Because no one races for a composite team. We're like, Bennington, Vermont. And they get this look like, man, we're surprised your wagon made it this far, so.
Why? So there's no high school mountain biking in New England, or there's not like a Vermont. It's what is it called? NICA, the whatever.
Yeah, I think there is, but I mean, we got. It's one of those things like Bennington's just closer to Albany.
Yeah.
I do think there's a New England series, but I think it's mostly kids, Massachusetts and Connecticut. At least it's hard to find stuff on the internet for them. Whereas, New York's got a pretty robust social media and, you connect into HRRT. They used to put on the Central Park series in August. We missed that because that was a fun place and it was a nice kind of low key, competitive training ride basically.
Yep.
And so, my kids have connected with kids who race HRT and that's where Noah got, that's where Noah is.
And he got sucked into it from that. So actually that was the other thing that I kind of wanted to talk to you about as we go around in the circle. You're a junior dad and you have junior racers, right?
Yeah.
So,
and kind of by accident. Look, I did 5 or 6 cross races a season, and I love all the local ones. And I have yet to go do the classics. I guess I'll get around to that once my kids get out of college or something. I don't know. But Noah jumped into one of the Wickeds, and I never pushed him. I'm like, hey, bud, if you want to, and, running shoes and shorts and a T-shirt. And he didn't really, he was like, yeah, it was kind of fun. And then, Maggie, who's my middle one, she went to, I think, Troy one year. Remember that? She was like in sparkly shoes and she hasn't worn sparkly shoes since then. But
I do remember that.
And like, she was like, this is the coolest thing ever. I mean, it's hard. People look like they're going to throw up. You have the potential of falling off and getting hurt. I want more of this. So
you might barf, you might die. Let's do it.
Yeah. And then my youngest, Finnegan, has been racing for a couple seasons now, and it's definitely his favorite season. I mean, he cross country skis competitively. He plays lacrosse competitively, but he's like, cyclocross is my favorite. So much so, I think he's going to quit soccer this fall and just focus on riding the bike.
Oh, wow.
But, they're the kind of kids who show up to races, and if it's raining, they're like, this is awesome because we know half the field thinks this sucks and they don't want to be here. And, the weirder and the more challenging the course, they just think that you're just getting your money's worth. That's all.
They're really, really down for it in the classic sense is what it seems like. How old was Noah when he started?
I don't know, maybe 11 or 12. He's been racing for 4 or 5 years, I would say.
And they were all probably, each one then kind of successively was, about that age.
Yeah. I mean, we're recycling bicycles. So, the first little 24-inch wheeled red line has gone out the door. I think that's at the Rizzi household or in some farm system for HRT. The Emma White red line just went out the door. So that's got some magic. Maggie was really mad when I said she was too big for that bike. She was not happy at all. And that's like the biggest, and again, and we're a family that chooses to race bicycles and race cross country skiing. So those are two sports that are not cheap if you have any, if you need to keep equipment somewhat competitive and somewhat updated. But, I think that's a challenge for parents who are going to be supporting juniors, and the juniors on NYCROSS. Those parents are really supportive and make sure that they get to their kids' races and make sure they have equipment. But, you got to kind of set your allowance aside, and you've probably noticed the Payne kids are all racing on hand-me-downs and cobbled together collections and things like that. So,
do you think that matters? Do your kids ever say anything about the fact that they're on, bikes that are coming from other places? Because I see two sets of juniors. I see some juniors, you go to these bigger races and there's juniors who are on carbon wheels and have the latest bike and Di2. And these are these people who are, labeled as very elite Devo kids. And I might be exaggerating. I don't know that I see any juniors in Di2, but you follow me. And then the other collection of juniors, and it's not just your kids, it's like most of the other juniors are then on stuff that is definitely gotten it's had a life.
Oh yeah. But you got to remember, I mean, my kids only know me racing on a full steel Stevens lugged cross bike with like a hand-me-down Mavic wheel set, which I just upgraded to like 9-speed this year. So
welcome to 1997.
Yeah. So my kids are constantly teasing me like I never bought a complete bike. I always cobble things together, and that's how their bikes go out the door. So there's kind of this weird badge of courage. Like Noah races a hand-me-down Ridley with like Dura Ace 8-speed. And I offered to change it out. And he's like, nope, that's what I like. It's what I like the feel to it. Everybody's still on cannies because, I mean, the idea of switching over to disc would just blow their minds. It would blow my budget, but it would blow their minds.
You'd have to like get a second mortgage.
All new frames, all new components.
Yeah, and it's cross. You're going to beat the crap out of equipment. And it's like, and my kids are growing like 3 inches a year. You just outgrow stuff. So why, I'm always banging on the door and asking if people have got, Eric knows this. I'm always asking, you got a frame hanging in, you got wheel sets, Hey,
what happened to my frame? Do you still have that frame?
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
That thing's been rebuilt with like 9-speed, and it's got a Mavic wheel set on it again. Noah uses it. He's been training on it because when he needs to do road work, that's his bike. I've convinced him. I'm like, it's a smoother ride than the Ridley on a long distance, like gravel road.
Yeah.
And he's only recently has he seen the wisdom of Dad's advice on that. So
interesting. So he's starting to soften up, and that he doesn't want to get completely beat on like a 3-hour ride on an aluminum cyclocross bike. That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, and then I went out and blew his mind this winter. I cobbled together a couple pennies and a project. And so I found myself a aluminum bike with a full carbon fork, through axle, and the 10-speed group that I bought from you, and a Stan's wheel set that's now tubeless. And Noah's like, wow, Dad, you're only like 3 years behind where you need to be. What are we going to do with you? So.
This is a really interesting commentary about the sport of cycling and the barriers to participation, because it's obviously outrageously expensive. I think that goes without saying. Anybody who's listening to this podcast knows that it's outrageously expensive. But yet there is obviously an ability to participate in it in a really legitimate and meaningful way without spending a gazillion dollars. But there's this pressure, right? There's like Noah's making fun of you for having a bike that's got 3-year-old parts on it, right?
Yeah.
How do you deal with other than being silly? Do you have to like address that with your kids? Do you have to say, look, you don't need to have deep dish carbon tubulars on your cross bike. Don't worry, you're going to beat that kid anyway, or does it not come up?
My kids have never asked. I mean, Noah did buy himself a really nice mountain bike a couple years ago, which he saved his money for. He bought a full suspension, transition. I mean, it's a fun bike to ride, 1 by, I don't know, 10 or 11 or whatever it is. And I mean, that's kind of his pride and joy, but everything else in the garage is hand-me-downs. And really for my kids, it's not a big deal, but that may also be that, their dad's never ridden fancy bikes. So what's the need? You go out and ride the bike and see how it goes.
Yeah. I mean, it's inspiring to everybody out there who is like me and is not riding their bike, but figuring that if they just buy a new bike, then it'll be better.
How's that working out for you, Eric?
I've been riding actually since I bought that new bike. It inspired me to ride.
There you go.
So sometimes it works.
Yeah, I think it's just I'm lucky. I don't have kids who need equipment to participate, and they don't really seem to give two hoots about it. They love, I'll date myself again because Mark probably doesn't remember this, but ice weasels used to be run in a little old lady's backyard near Walpole, Mass, before they moved it north of Boston for a bigger venue. Yeah. And we were lined up one time because they don't even do like categories. They do like Jedi and, I don't know, something silly. And we're sitting in the back row because they do call-ups there. And next to me is another Masters. And this guy's on like a full carbon, deep dish. He's got rhinos on it. It had, I don't know, a gazillion gears in the back. Then he had a matching pit bike that I'd seen him roll in. and I'm on my Stevens. And then the kid next to me is on a Geek House with like old school, open Mavics and I don't know, they were like Tufos or something. And the kid looks over at me. He's got this huge beard, but he's, the total hipster. And he looks over at me and he goes, "We may be the only two clowns in this race with full steel bicycles." Like it was like a badge of honor sitting in the back. But I mean, we were like the beginner masters field and just the money being spent. Who cares? You're just having fun. I think part of it is just if you've been racing cross long enough that you remember people used to like repurpose hybrids and road bikes to race cross.
Yeah, for sure.
Then you're in the good. You're all right. I'm comfortable with whatever people buy and race bikes. That's cool. Whatever gets you out there racing, I don't care. I just don't have the means or the patience to spend that kind of dough on a bike I know I'm going to just beat the tar out of.
This is like the opposite of an ad for a major bicycle company.
Yeah,
I'm getting an old hybrid. Ride it. Who gives a crap?
Well, I mean, if you were racing at Putney 20 years ago, that's what you saw. I mean, you just saw people, racing like old steel road bikes that you could wedge, and the tubulars were skinny then, so you could cob things, you could figure it out. But having said that, you know what? My new bike with through axle, that's a pretty nice invention. I think they got that one right. I'm okay with that.
What kind of bike is it?
It's a Fuji Jari. It's their adventure cross, gravel bike, basically.
The dual. Oh, that's your new triathlon bike.
That's my new triathlon bike.
I like that when you select a bike for a purpose, you actually still like you got like a modern bike, but to do triathlons, but you got a gravel bike to do the triathlon on. So like it's still disjointed. You still doesn't mesh up right.
Well, I mean, a friend of mine locally who's very committed to the sport. I mean, she rides one of these BMC time machines, and a time trial bike is a pretty nice weapon to have, but that's in Vermont at least. I rode what I had was a Fuji Aloha, which is like their entry level aluminum triathlon bike.
Yeah, I had one of those.
And oh yeah, that's right. I remember seeing that in your basement. So I had that, and it's pretty fun to ride on those straight roads, but it's kind of a terrifying ride in steep downhill Reedsboro, Vermont, where you're navigating potholes and, seams in the asphalt. It doesn't really inspire because you're slammed on the bullhorns and you're trying not to kill yourself. And then, and what I really want to do is be riding dirt roads, which, a gravel or a tri-bike's not going to do that. So
no.
So
not more than once, at least.
Yeah. And the other thing is you get older, these gravel bikes, they got a taller head tube, man. And that for me has been the difference. I don't want to have pain in my hands. I don't want my back hurting. I don't want my butt going numb, and it is what it is.
So I know who to sell my Dumani to now when I'm ready to upgrade.
You don't want to do cycling, is what you're saying. That's what I hear there.
What do you mean I don't want to do cycling?
You don't want your butt to hurt. You don't want your hands to hurt. You don't want to be bent over too much.
Well,
hey, your butt and your hands shouldn't hurt. That means you have a bad fit.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true. But you have to have a slam that stem sticker on your bike, or you're not cool.
Oh, screw that!
I added a 1 centimeter spacer back in last night.
1 centimeter spacer. I'm gonna come over to your house when you're not around and cut your fork and make it all low.
This is why I won't cut my fork.
So I wanted to ask you about the Wicked Creepy some and talk at least a little bit about your experience putting it on. I thought maybe you could give our listening audience an idea of, not like the boring details of how to get a USA cycling permit. If somebody needs to do that, they can call me up and I'll walk them through it. But
we'll link to the USAC webpage on how to do that.
So I mean, you've had some like weird kind of challenges with the race over the years, right? Didn't you have to like cancel it because of a hurricane one year and then because of a snowstorm the next year? And you want to fill our crew in on what that was like?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and Eric, you and I talked about this, that, cross may have kind of found its top end as far as participation. But I still think it's going to be one of those places where it's, kind of a fall sport. It fits in with the season, is about how much riding do you need to be doing it for fun. So I think there's going to continue to be a need for racing going forward, which is kind of cool. But I mean, I think you need to find a venue where people are comfortable with what you're doing. You got to do a little education, because we have a BMX track in our park, and I think people thought we were just going to bring adults and race them on the BMX track.
When you say education, you're talking about education of like the locals, like the non-bike people.
Yeah, you got to kind of be clear with your parks folks, like what this could possibly do to foot traffic and damage to the park, and they got to be cool with that, because you and I have both seen people, when we first started, there was a huge race put on by Nav out east in Boston, and then the guy retired and they just couldn't find a home anymore. And I think that's what people have seen a lot in cross races. You kind of lose your sight and then you're done. I think the other thing you need to do is have a good, patient group of volunteers. I have, all those guys who rode down to nationals with me, none of them race cross anymore. They've moved on to kids. They've moved on to other sports. Some of them have retired, but they don't race cross anymore. But they, I feed them beer and take them out for food after they put on the race. And I thank them a lot and I beg, and they just keep kind of coming back. We've been very fortunate over the years. We've always had people kind of show up at our door and want to offer prizes and support. Pierce Brother Coffee. I mean, that came from, a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy. And he said, I'm going to bring buddies and help you pound steaks. And I'm going to bring merchandise to give away for prizes. And we didn't send a text. We didn't send an email. That guy just showed up. But we make sure we write a letter and we say thank you. And we, when we print a T-shirt, we make sure 2 of them go back in the box that goes back to the warehouse. And, you just try to, thank people. But we've had a few curveballs. I mean, the one year we had it snow. Remember that? We actually set the race up, and my 4 friends who are like the founding members were like, all right, it's your decision. Are we doing this race or not? And we canceled. And Bike Ridge was awesome. They helped us do that, pretty straightforward. And we woke up to 2 inches of snow, which isn't epic, but it wiped out like Western Massachusetts and Connecticut, and like people didn't get out of their houses for like a week. So we're glad we canceled, because we wouldn't have wanted people driving to Bennington and getting hurt on the way in. So that was a challenge.
I've never had to cancel a race. Do you think that people reasonably accepted that it couldn't happen and they just were cool with it? Or did you get backlash from people being like, it's cross, it's so hardcore, any weather, why is it canceled?
We use Bike Reg. We use the email function in there. You send it all over to everybody. Hey guys, we know there's going to be a couple inches of snow. We lack the equipment to clear it. I mean, it was also, remember it was October. So, the ground, we would have, even if we had, I have a snowblower, but we would have torn the crap out of the park to try to clear snow, and that's not cool because you want to be invited back. So, it was kind of one of those things where I don't think we got any email back from people who were like, you're a bunch of wusses, we're never racing there again, because it's, clearly, it's not NYCROSS,
Yeah.
So I don't think anybody really gave us a hassle. I've raced at Troy with the rain. And I appreciate the fact that you still put on that race, because that was probably the most cross-like conditions I've ever raced in. So
we've had a lot of luck with having dry weather in Troy. I think out of all the editions of it at this point now, a number of them, I think there's really only been maybe 1 or 2 days where it really, really rained, where, regardless of the time of day, regardless of what race you were doing, you were in the rain and it was just a mud bog the whole way around.
Yeah.
When you canceled for snow, do you know if anybody showed up anyway? Did you go down to the park and see if there were people there, or were you just like, I'm snowed in and if people were there or whatever?
I do. Because the next day, the day we were going to do the race, some buddies of mine and I piled into Art's VW bus with, a couple 6-packs of beer and our mountain bikes, and we did a couple hot laps, and we didn't see anybody there.
Dude, That's the most Vermont thing you could possibly say.
And we were young, we were stupid. We were racing for like Molson or something, for the love of God. It wasn't even like, it wasn't
I thought you said you liked beer.
I do, but we leave Art I think we left Art to buy the beer, and clearly that was a poor choice. So, he's been fired since then. We buy our own beer now.
Fired as the beer director. Have you ever considered not running the race anymore? Have you ever just said, you know what, this is the last year I'm doing this?
I think like probably 2016. I had a couple friends who were really like, Tim, really, I got so much other stuff. A couple of them had transitioned into like management jobs and administration jobs. And I work in a school district, and, they were like, I don't know, Tim, my life's pretty busy. My own kids, like none of their kids race bikes. I'm the one goofball that's got, 3 teenagers that'll be willing to hop in a car and, go to Del Mar or Troy and race bikes in a circle. But, and I think at that point they were like, I don't know if we can keep kind of cobbing it together every day, Tim. Because really on race day, it's kind of one of those magical things. Like the Boy Scouts show up and start cooking food, and the ski team shows up to help put tape on the course, and my buddies show up to but by the end of the day they were just getting tired. And I think that's when we reached out to we now have a bicycle, a mountain bike chapter of oh my God, why is the name it's BATS, it's Bennington Area Trail System, but they're connected to the Mountain Bike Trail Building Association for Vermont.
You're talking about NBSP?
Yeah. So they've been building a trail system, a pretty extensive mountain biking trail system on Mount Anthony, and done a lot of work with, property owners and connecting it to Southern Vermont College and they're just doing it all. And I said, hey, if you can give me some volunteer hours, a couple days in October, we can make you, it's not a huge money maker. That you've been doing it for longer than I have. You cover your bills, pay a few people. What we do is anything we make, we give back to the community. Like no one on the race staff makes any money except for, 2 complimentary beers at, Harvest Brewery, and I'll buy you a big burrito from, Cilantro's next door. Which
sounds like a pretty good deal.
I know, now I'm really hungry. And BATS stepped up. They're like, yeah, we can do that, which has been helpful because, there's another 10 people that just show up and either prep the park on Saturday or help us tear it down on Sunday.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but this year I thought went off really well. The numbers have kind of stabilized right where it is. And this year was, we had a local race the day before we put on it, and I don't think it whacked us that hard. You and I have talked about this for years. It's a continuing frustration. And the reason that the Wicked sits on October 28th this year, it's the Sunday before Halloween. We've just always picked it because, 11 years ago when we looked at the calendar, the only other race going on was the NAV race outside of Boston.
Yeah.
We didn't have to compete against Putney. We didn't have to compete against Northampton. There was a whole series in East Hampton for a while that got up and was really competitive. And then that disappeared. I don't know where that went. That was like Cyclonauts or something. That was like their big, boy, I feel like I'm a history book of like local cross here. That series popped up, but they were different in that they just paid cash in every category. They just took registration fees and divvied them up and paid cash. Yeah.
I don't think those were USAC races either. I think those were like show up and whatever you got races.
Yeah. And I don't know if you ever rode that park, man, but that was gnarly. That was like a mountain bike race. There was like 12-minute loops there. Yeah. It was nuts.
I raced at that park a couple times, and you're absolutely right. It was like it was more like a cross-country mountain bike race. You could definitely, it was long enough ago that I don't think 29ers were a thing when I raced there, but in retrospect,
it would have been helpful.
A 29er would be like the fastest thing around that race course for sure.
Oh yeah.
Man, yeah. 29ers weren't a thing when we were doing this. Can't imagine.
You guys are old.
I can't imagine riding a mountain bike that's not a 29er now. Actually, I have a 27.5 mountain bike myself, so I should shut up. But never mind.
Oh yeah. So. Yeah, I think that's with a new group of people in. I think it's helpful, and and I've got kids, and at this point, I would see myself continuing to organize this race as long as I've got my own kids looking to do races. You got to give back, and this is the kind of the way I do it. Is put on a race, try to do the best you can, bring them to a pretty spot, try to benefit the community and. So far, that formula seems to be working.
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with all of those. Your race is, in our series at least, it's the most picturesque venue by orders of magnitude. It's beautiful. And I think you do more for the community than any of the other events that we have. And I say that knowing exactly what we do for the community in Troy, and we try to do a lot. But it sounds like you have really, you're funding a mountain bike trail system, essentially, which is radical, right?
Yeah, we donate to the Boy Scouts. We cover their costs and double that, and we always make a donation to the cross country ski team because racing wax is ridiculously expensive, and that's not a budget item here in Bennington. So we try to chip in for that, and we try to make good on promises to volunteers that if you show up, we put some money towards your organization. So
I'm going to have to come up with an organization and then come and volunteer.
Yeah, I mean, and we're fortunate. I mean, a trail building system or a group in the community, I mean, they're just a natural fit. Pounding stakes for them, they're like, oh, I don't have to haul a chainsaw or a blower like 2,000 vertical feet up to the top of the hill and carve something. Great, let's do this.
This is easy. This is exactly. This might be just my own personal interest and sort of far flung, but what are those trails like? How many? Is there enough trails to warrant a trip from, say, Albany to come up and ride them, or is it still getting built?
Well, I'd encourage people, if they're around this Saturday, they do what they call their Trail Mix Day, and it's basically put on by Southern Vermont College, and you can show up and you can ride. And I think it's worth a trip over from Albany. What's it like? Well, it's basically two trail systems leaving from Southern Vermont College, which is an old estate from some robber baron in the turn of the century. Actually, I know what he made his money. He made his money.
Wait. What was the robber baron making his money on?
I think the guy who built this. So this mansion is like $1 million mansions 100 years ago. Like he shipped over artisans from Italy and had them live here for a year and build this beautiful summer house for him up on the hill. And it used to be the largest apple orchard in New England or something like that. So basically that property is now Southern Vermont College and then adjoining farms for people who own that. So the trail system to the right or to the north is a lot of hills uphill, but then you get a lot of downhill, long downhill, sweeping corner stuff. If you go south, it's got a long hill up because you're going to load the system. And then it's a very technical rockscape, jumping logs, downhill course. So it's a chat. A lot of the guys are riding, a lot of the people are riding dualies, 27 pluses or 29ers to take advantage of traction and travel. I choose to ride it on a rigid fat bike because, that's what I ride. So
I'm shocked that it's a fat bike, actually. I was sure you were going to say I choose to ride it on a rigid Gary Fisher from 1988.
No, it's a Surly Pugsley with, actually my kids totally surprised me last Christmas. They bought me another leap in technology. They bought me a set of 27 plus tubeless wheel set complete with tires. So it's changed my life. I love them.
They knew they had to give it to you just in a way like here, just put this on your bike. It's all set.
Oh no, they did better than that, man. We got all done opening presents. We were starting to make breakfast, and they're like, "Oh, wait a minute, we got one more thing for you, Dad." So they went out to the neighbors next door. They come back and they've got this beater box, like this Schwinn bicycle box that looks like it's been mauled by a hammer. And they're like, "Yeah, we found this project for you." And I was like, "Oh, great," because they know people give me bikes all the time, and then I try to give them away. And I was like, "Oh, great! What the hell project they get me for this time?" And inside was 2 brand new wheels, which was very cool.
That's spectacular.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Man, I hope that someday my children will bring me a beater box from, of a Walmart Schwinn, and then inside of it find something really awesome, or actually even just a shitty Walmart Schwinn. That would also be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
I'm looking at the trail.
They're off the hook. They don't have to buy me any gifts for a while. They're all set.
So this loop, how long, if you go and do a big loop of it, how long is a ride? Is it an hour ride? It looks like it's pretty extensive.
Yeah, I mean, you can ride out from my front porch. You go through a wooded section that the hospital owns that we call Rivendell, which is this. Most of the trails were made by NOAA, so it's got a lot of twisty turny.
Most of the trails tracks. Were just made by NOAA. I like that.
It was. Well, it was a wood lot with a single trail through it, and the hospital didn't really pay attention to it. And Noah, about 5 years ago, just started disappearing into the woods with a shovel and a pick, and he'd be gone for hours. And I guess I'm free range parenting before it was a thing. And he'd come back, and he's like, "Hey, Dad, I want you to go ride these trails with me." And yeah, he does a nice job. The kid's got an eye. So now he's working on.
How old is Noah?
He's 17. He's got a good eye.
So I'm just picturing 13-year-old Noah out there building your trails secretly behind a hospital. We probably shouldn't be talking about this. Somebody's going to listen to it and report us.
They know it's there now. They pulled him aside and said, "Hey, look, we're really impressed with some of them. We want to mulch them and turn them into walking paths," which, he was like, "All right, it's your property."
Mulch them in what?
Yeah, well, they wanted places for people to walk and stuff. So Noah's moved farther up the hill. So yeah, if you leave my house and you do Flat Tire, Dead Fox, and Hops and Vines, it's probably an hour loop that you would ride from my house.
That's pretty sweet.
Those are trail names. So, I mean, Flat Tire is a very flowy up and down, a lot of curves in it. Dead Fox is the climb, and then the really fun downhill, but it's technical. I probably wouldn't take a beginner on it. I wouldn't want to scare them too much. And then Hops and Vine is just the downhill back to the college, which is very fun. You really get zipping along on that. A couple rock gardens, things like that.
Nice. Well, we are very far flung from talking about cyclocross racing, but this time of year, this is probably more interesting. I imagine that bats would love to have people come and ride these trails. So to talk about them and encourage people to go ride them is probably a good thing, right?
Absolutely.
To not, keep you away from your family all night. I should ask you at least the last 2 questions that I wanted to ask you, which is, I'm going to actually ask you the one I thought would be the last question first. But if you won the lotto, would you still be running the Wicked Creepy, or would you be on your private island?
Oh, dude, we only play the lottery when it's over 300 million, because otherwise it's not really worth it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, winning 50 million would be
a hassle. Paperwork alone would be a hassle. I tell my wife all this time, because last year we loaded the kids in the van and built a like hillbilly trailer and filled it with bicycles and roller skis and fly fishing gear and drove to California and back. And I told Rach, I'm like, if I won $300 million, I would buy myself the coolest Sprinter van, and I would just put on races year round. I'd put on winter triathlons. I'd do cyclocross. I'd have a fat bike race. I'd do it all, man. I'm
right there with you. Every time I'm in Stewart's buying, a coffee or something, and I see that the lotto's up to 300 million, and then I buy a ticket. The first thing I fantasize is about just driving to Porsche of Manhattan and just buying whatever the fastest available Porsche is, like at the store that day.
Then you're going to need the rest of the money to pay for the maintenance costs.
And then, dude, it's your warranty. You're buying a brand new one. then from there, I would just immediately start to figure out how to have like as many UCI cyclocross races as I can put on myself.
Yeah, absolutely. I would enjoy that tremendously, but yeah, no private island. That'd be boring. I get rock fever in about 3 months, and I'd be ready to paddle off.
You'd be talking to your soccer ball.
Exactly.
Where do you think the Wicked Creepy fits into the pantheon of cyclocross now? It's sort of an outlier because it's the New England stop on our NYCROSS series, but it's also one of the most popular races. It's not the redheaded stepchild because people love it. So where do you think it fits? Is it Putney? Can we talk about the Wicked like people talk about Putney with reverence now? Or?
I've raced Putney. I raced Putney 20 years ago when it was still a tractor pull through the corn rows in the back property. And now we went back there this year because a lot of times that race lines up with Del Mar. And we choose to go to Del Mar instead of Putney. But that course now is all on the property. And it's kind of a throwback, it's like NYCROSS. There's so many sections that are just, there's no way Gary signs off on those if you had that, if you had it USA Cycling, but it is a USA Cycling. I mean, Putney gets reverence because they've been at it for 25 years.
I don't say that to put us in competition with Putney. They've been at it as long as, just about anybody's been at it, right?
Yeah. I mean, and yet they kind of draw the Northampton, New Hampshire crowd. They get a couple of the juniors from the Burlington area come down. What's amazing about Cross in Vermont is that there's no more races up north. I mean, it's really Putney and us. And, Putney is the more prestigious because they've been around longer. I don't think the course is any more challenging. You do tend to get a little more competitive field in like junior classes, and they have a couple more categories for women. They tend to draw a bigger crowd, and that's probably because they got Northampton right down the highway. But sometimes I have not recently, but first 6 years of Wicked, I was like, well, why aren't we hosting the Vermont State Championship? Why don't we have people come over and, that'd be really cool. But at this point, I'm like, nah, we just, as part of NYCROSS, we just want to assure people that, no, we're really part of NYCROSS and we put on a good series. And at this point, I think, there's so many people who just travel the circuit and race all the races. It feels like, it's kind of like a homecoming event to have everybody visit us every October. It's just fun to see people who've raced with us for years and, go out of their way to support us. And I really appreciate, like the young brothers who, those guys could race, anywhere. I mean, they could be busy racing anywhere and they make time to come out and do the little races. And then they just do really nice connecting with the kids and all that stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of people like that. So it's truly a community when you really break it down, Every year I see the same 200 people at all these races, and it shocks me that it's going like that forever and ever.
I still think that NYCROSS is that, like, it's a great place to develop juniors. I like the idea that we're going to focus on trying to get more women athletes out to try it out. I think it's just such a fun sport in the fall because you're losing daylight every day, and cross still fits in.
Yeah, right.
No one's racing road bikes at that time, and triathlons are wrapped up by mid-September. So if you're going to do something that's going to get some exercise and it doesn't take a whole lot of your day, cross is the place to do it. And I've always liked the just people are just are very friendly, really willing to help you. God, remember when the Brett and Brad would show up and they'd had some hand-me-down U-Haul. Now they got this one with a glossy side to it, and they greet my kids. They ask them how the day's going. How'd your race go? What'd you run for tire pressure? So people who clearly take it much more serious than me, then still have an opportunity to have a positive impact on, especially kids, which I'm impressed with.
It's spectacular. What do you think is harder to do? Promote the Wicked Creepy or do your own homemade Iron Man?
I don't know, man. This year, the Wicked just kind of came together. I used to stress like 2 weeks out from a race until I finally figured out the curve for like bike reg, and that, cyclocrossers are like the ultimate procrastinators. They don't sign up until Thursday or Friday before the race.
Yeah.
And you're like, everybody's going to show up. We'll be fine. I'll just keep hammering them with emails and Facebook, and, folks come out and support us. I think training for an Ironman is easier because, I had a coach. He'd sent me training plans. It was the first time I ever had a coach. I've been a hack athlete for a long time. And, my training would just show up Monday morning, and it was awesome. You just opened it and you're like, oh, that's what I'm doing today. Didn't have to give it a thought. Just go out and swim the laps or go run or ride the bike. And, whereas, the Wicked can sometimes feel a little bit like what I do for a living, which is a middle school principal. And, you got people who rely on you to make decisions, and you got to make sure that things are getting done. And thankfully, I don't have to put anybody in suspension or detention when I'm doing the Wicked, because they'd all tell me to pound sand and leave anyway. So,
do you still have the goats that live adjacent to the course and escape and run out either into the middle school during the day or into the race course, depending on the time of the day?
The goats have moved on, man.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah. Well, if my daughter had her way, we'd have goats in the backyard, but I live in a tiny house, so that's not going to happen. So
no goats at the House of Pain.
No, she works at a farm with alpacas and sheep and goats. She gets plenty of fiber contact time all day long, so she's good. She's all set.
Good. That's awesome, man. Oh, I feel like we should wrap it there. I think fiber contact time is as good as we get. Tim, it's been excellent talking to you. Do you have any social media or other mechanisms that you would like to share with people if they want to contact you about your race or have questions or anything else that you want to tell people?
I'm old school. I'm on Instagram now. So like everybody else was 10 years ago. So yeah. Not that, because Facebook is now a Russian entity and I just, I can't trust it anymore, but I'm on Instagram. And so I occasionally, post pictures of my adventures. So, and I noticed that I have a few more of my, NYCROSS folks following me. So that's cool. You can check it out. And I don't have any cutesy name like, Sunflower Power or anything goofy like that. It's just T-Pain. It's just Tim Payne.
Tim Payne?
So.
At Tim Payne on Instagram?
Yeah.
I'll make sure I'll shoot you a picture of myself wearing the Wicked Creepy Cross t-shirt that I've been wearing for this whole conversation.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Amateur Hour CX. If you have liked these episodes, please consider supporting us on Patreon to help offset production costs. You can find the link for that in the show notes below. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at mwalling. Eric pretends he's the show account, which you can follow at Amateur Hour CX on Twitter. please make sure to subscribe in your podcast player so you get our next episode in a couple weeks. Thanks. See you then.
Should I close my Facebook, social media main line and actually start thinking about the podcast?
Yes, please.